Hello and welcome back to another edition of ESPN Scrum Reset. Sam Bruce joined as ever by Christy Doran. Christy, mate, fantastic to see you. It's been a hell of an off-season. I know we were back last week breaking down the All Blacks in a podcast that's gone really well on YouTube in particular with the great Liam Napier. But, mate, there is plenty happening. I can't remember, we've had big off-seasons, maybe one big bit of news, but this just kind of keeps coming left, right and centre.
It's actually what Super Rugby and rugby in Australia has desperately needed. You think about all the drama of rugby league, the NRL, the gift that keeps on giving. Well, it's kind of come back very quickly in January to rugby union. I think it's the best thing. There needs more drama. Rugby fans need to feel like there's an aspect of their sport that's goes for 365 days of the year. And we know it does in other sports in Australia. So I think it's great. And you're right, it has come thick and fast. And we kind of floated that there was going to be some news last week, those that listened to the pod, right? Again, dropping some that the contracting news was around the corner and it actually dropped the very next day. So, yeah, big times in rugby union. And I think it's fantastic. We'll be a couple of us jetting across to New Zealand for the launch of the Super Rugby 2026 competition in Auckland in about a week's time or so. So, it's not far away.
It's not far away at all. Rugby league, a bit of rugby league about it, as you said there. Of course, the Miles Amatosero incident with Angus Scott Young at the Waratahs will come to shortly. But the news hot off the press this morning, the Queensland Reds. Now, there's an organisation that's got its house in order, it feels like these days, Christy. In case you've missed it, just jumping on now, Vern Cotter, the Blues coach, to move across the Tasman and take charge at Ballymore later this year and officially start with the team for the 2027, a 2-year deal, and 2028 Super Rugby seasons. I mean, this feels like a great bit of business, Christy.
It's one of the most fascinating signatures in the 30 years of Super Rugby, I think, because tell me another coach. There's been some big coaches that have come down. I even think of Warren Gatland when he was coming back after the 2019 World Cup with the Chiefs, but he wasn't the head coach at that point in time either. The Tanner on Amagas, the Michael Checkers, the Ewan McKenzie move was fascinating when, Brumbies and to the Tahs and then later on with the Reds, and what a golden few years he had, particularly 2011, obviously. But I think it is what the Reds needed. They certainly looked in-house. There was an obvious candidate to strongly contemplate in Zane Hilton. But Vern Cotter, credentialed is what stands out to me, and successful. Like, if two words that the Reds would love to see come about in 2027, 28, but he follows in Michael Checker's league of being one of only a couple of people to win major trophies up in the north and the south. And in addition to that, he's highly credentialed and experienced from an international point of view. Obviously, with Scotland, the 2015 World Cup, he spent time at Montpellier, Fiji for a brief while, and he led the Blues out of for decades, like this long slumber, and he picked them up, turned it around straight away, and I think it's brilliant.
Feels like a really good bit of business. You mentioned Scotland there. That 2015 quarterfinal stands out to me because the Craig-Joubert decision there, Bernard Foley steps up and kicks the match-winning penalty. That coming off the restart, knock-on bit of the shades of the final lines test about it, Christy, in 2017 with the All Blacks. He then goes to Fiji. The Fiji stint didn't go as well probably as things at Scotland's. A bit going on behind the scenes there. And as you say, it comes into the Blues and gets it done. A franchise that has underperformed for so long, playing Route 1 kind of forwards-based rugby. And that's where the intrigue will be for me in this, Christy. We know the Reds under Les Kiss have played a really attractive, really up-tempo brand of footy. I don't know that Vern will kind of pick that up and run with it. I suggest he'll come in, and he even kind of said so today on the presser. It's about finding that 2 or 3% that's missing there in the Reds. He's confident he'll be able to find it. And I think that's just a little bit of starch in key moments consistently week in, week out, because the Reds have shown it. They can beat the Crusaders away. They've beaten the Chiefs and the Blues at home and look really good. But it's those 1 or 2 games a year where they slip up. I think that's what Vern Cotter will help remedy up there at Ballymore.
And it's not just the slipping up, it's slipping up in pivotal championship winning moments. The Reds have made the quarterfinals for what is it now, 3-4 years straight. They did it under Brad Thorne. and they've done it since for the last couple of years under Les Kiss. But at no point in time have you thought they're winning this quarterfinal, because they go over there and you think they probably don't have the bruising forwards. They get slightly intimidated, and it's all about hard, strong defensive lines in Super Rugby finals matches in June. We're not talking about the pretty rugby that you can play in February. So I think that hard edge that Vern Cotter will bring is exactly what the organisation needs. Those that I've spoken to all said what a hard taskmaster he is. And I remember about, a year ago when we were talking about Joe Schmidt and what life might look like for the Wallabies post Joe Schmidt. Vern Cotter was a person that people thought, this is a guy that Rugby Australia should be considering, should be right at the top of the CV list. And Morgan Turinui, you don't get better voices than Morgan Turinui when it comes to Australian rugby. He said, if it's not Michael Checker, I'd be going after Vern Cotter. And it's fascinating. This point in time of year, you're going, hang on, is Vern Cotter actually more credentialed? Would you prefer him to be the Wallabies coach going forward? Some might.
Well, beyond that, even Christy, and Vern said today, look, he wasn't aware that nobody was aware that this change was coming at the All Blacks. Razor was going to get the sack, and had that been the case, then it might be a different situation. But he said he was 3 months virtually down the line with the Reds in terms of the negotiations, and was committed there. And what does that mean, though, I guess, beyond that? Like, if we gaze ahead, say, beyond 27, 28, if Vern was to do great things and get the Reds over the line, I mean, it probably doesn't reflect all that well on New Zealand rugby again at a time when they're already being dragged through the mud back at home.
It's fascinating. It's not just what does it mean for the All Blacks and for New Zealand rugby. It's what does it mean for Rugby Australia, because Les Kiss is contracted until, the end of 2028, I think it is. So if you're doing the maths and if things go well, then he would definitely be a candidate, you'd think. I think there's a lot of things. What does it mean? What does it mean for the coaching development pathways of Rugby Australia and Australian rugby at large, that you're not turning to an Australian candidate to fill the shoes of Les Kiss? This is another example that there is a dearth of proven Australian rugby coaches out there. I can't think of one. I don't think, apart from Michael Checker, there's not a single person that Australian who deserved to have the job, the Queensland Reds job, as it is, to replace Les Kiss. So there's so many assistants out there. There's guys like Ben Moen rising through the ranks, Rod Sibes going up to Connacht. Matt Taylor has always harboured ambitions of being a head coach and at Queensland. Todd Keffer, Chris Latham. List goes on and on. They haven't won anything. They haven't been head coaches that have won anything. A lot of them have only been assistant coaches. Some are rising and developing, like the Zane Hiltons of the world. But at this moment in time, there's not an Australian who you can go, that person should be the head coach of what is one of two biggest Super Rugby franchises in the country, being the Waratahs and the Reds. So I think it tells Australian rugby to get their house in order. You've got 2 years to find a proven Australian coach that could hopefully take over from Vern Cotter, because at the moment there's no one out there. And without Checker, with Scott Wiseman at the Parramatta Eels, I think it looks worse on Australia than it does New Zealand, who have let go of a Vern Cotter. My understanding is that he was at Ballymore, Vern Cotter, in December. So it has been, going down this route for a little while. Would Stern Vern had been the perfect choice at the All Blacks? I don't know about it at this moment in time, but they've still got some very, very well-credentialed people that could come in there to replace Scott Robinson.
Yeah, it feels like a Jamie Joseph versus Dave Rennie situation, as we discussed last week. This is our big Super Rugby Pacific 2026 preview. I'm going to get there team by team shortly, Christy, but as we mentioned off the top, a couple of other things have been bubbling away in Australia for the last week. Let's go to the Miles Amateur Zero. Angus Scott Young, training dust up, however you want to term it rather. Look, bit of rugby league about it. And McKellar is it didn't work out so well for the Waratahs last year. They started well, and we'll dig on this shortly, but takes a real physical edge, works his players hard. Now, this, as we said, broke week before early last week, sorry. And then the footage over the weekend emerges. And look, it's not a great look, really, is it? There'll be people looking at it and say, well, that's great stuff. You like to see your players getting into it and getting into it really, really hard. But this probably overstepped that line. Miles Amadasero, as a result, has been given a 4-game internal suspension, I guess, really. And then we see it kick off over the weekend. His father gets involved on social media. Drew Mitchell is involved on social media. And, there's some choice, not so wonderful words thrown around. But how do you feel this peters out here for the Waratahs, or stretches out here for the Waratahs this season? It's not a great look, as I said, but it certainly shows that training's been competitive, but fighting at training to that degree, not what you want, surely.
Yeah, I think the reporting around that's all been pretty accurate and on the mark. It obviously happened a couple of weeks ago, the actual incident itself. Rugby Australia was a bit slow off the mark. Peter Horn was involved, asking, from my understanding, Angus, what do you want in this situation? And I thought it should have been taken out of his hands immediately. This isn't for Angus Scott Young to determine, what happens next. But it's ugly that the footage got leaked out. It was probably a matter of time when a couple of people get it, that the spider web quickly grows. I think that the punishment is probably not quite severe enough in my view. I think New South Wales has gone, you know what, he's a very important cog to my team. That a couple of matches that he can get off by going, seeing a counsellor and ensuring that he's psychologically there.
Bit of tackling school about that one.
Yeah, it's so 2 matches he's going to miss, and they're both trial games, so it's very convenient, isn't it? But he's an important person for the Waratahs, and he's exactly the type of figure that Dan McKellar has spent the last 12 months, 14, 15 months getting to this point in time where he plays close to the edge and he knows where that line is. And he's a very lucky man, in my opinion. I think repairing the relationship with Angus Scott Young could be interesting. There was a lot of the Waratahs that were out and about on Friday night following their trip to Mudgee. Angus was with them. I think, they'll get over it eventually. Footy players do, and there's always been players that haven't necessarily got along with others within the team. But managing that will be the most important thing there going forward. But Amatazero's got a huge role to play for the Waratahs, and I think it's probably why he hasn't missed more games.
Okay, what about then, I guess, the leaking of the footage? Because a lot of punters will probably be out there going, well, how has this gotten out? And we can speculate as to how and who might have leaked it. But is that a worry for the Waratahs? And I guess by extension, Rugby Australia, they should have been shut down, righto. The training footage from that day, maybe there was 1, 2 cameras on it. You get the memory cards out of that and they go away in someone's desk. Rugby Australia, Peter Horn sees it when he needs to. Is this a sign of something worse going on underneath at the Waratahs that did get out?
No, I don't think so. Look, I don't think anyone exactly knows how it got out. I got the video footage 3 days before or 4 days before it got leaked out. There's a little bit going on at the Raw at the moment, which meant that I didn't publish it. But also, a journalist has to at times balance breaking confidentiality and weighing up whether or not it's worth something going out or not. And that's at play with everything that you ever do as a journo. But I don't think it's Dan McKellar, from my understanding, was quite angry that it leaked out. But these things always do. They always do. And it wasn't a punter, it wasn't a journo that was at that training session where that caught the footage itself. So, yeah, you're right. It probably came from the person itself to begin with, and then he might not have wanted that to get out, but 1 or 2 people get it, and then all of a sudden it goes. So, all they've got to do now is win a game. And if they start winning games of footy,
people forget about it.
People forget about it immediately. If they make it more than what it is, and you talk to any coaches, any players, they all talk about the fact that punch-ups occur regularly. They don't often injure someone by fracturing someone in the head, but they've got to be careful that they balance that going forward.
And probably better that it happened in preseason too, rather than say 3 or 4 games in. That could really kind of, divert the season after a strong start, couldn't it? This is the time, righto. Month out, as it probably was at the time, blow the cobwebs out, shake hands, move on. Whereas mid-season, it gets jumped on all over, and it can really be a disruptor.
Well, mid-season, you're going to have journos that pop their heads in at different points in time, depending on where the media opportunities are or how busy the schedule is. But you're right. I think there's actually an element of the Waratahs fan base, which is going, about time. We've heard about the fact that the culture there at the Waratahs hasn't been great for a little while.
Yeah.
Certainly hasn't been a winning culture. I think there's a lot of people that go, a bit of tough love is good, but actions speak louder than words. And for a long time, the Waratahs have been February champions, haven't they? So
every year.
Yeah, I think we'll get to where we think the Waratahs are going to go. But Dan McKellar, wherever he's gone, probably struggled first year, and then things have got better. And I can see that with the progression, not just of Amateur Zero, but this Waratahs squad itself. So, yeah, well, I think there'll be a few people getting questioned how did the footage get out. But apart from that, you move on, and it's a good thing that the decision's already come out, even though I think it is a bit soft. There was a reader poll, might have been a News Corp poll, that a lot of the punters thought it was soft as well, that result. And I think they're right, it was. But we're not the ones that are making the decision.
The final big bit of news from the last few weeks we wanted to touch on, Christy, before we get into the big preview. Angus Crichton's deal with Rugby Australia, 2-year deal for 27 and 28. Look, this is one that selfishly I've been kind of looking forward to for some time. I knew it would happen at some point.
Why is that, Sam? Why selfish?
Because I watched a lot of him play as a schoolboy, and I feel like he could have answered a question at 12 there for Australia for some time. Now, as I wrote last week, it'll be, I think, 12 years before he actually pulls on a rugby boot again in the 15-player game anyway, and the comparison made with Joseph Alcuso Suoli, who was only gone for sort of 5 years. It's going to be a hell of a challenge, but I can't wait to see this in action. And, a lot of people off the gun thinking, well, okay, Angus comes in at number 12. He gets out back to 13. I mean, is there a question here where does Joseph Alcuso Suoli finish up potentially when you've got Tom Wright, who made a real case at fullback? And obviously we're putting the horse before the cart here. Or is that the other way around? The cart before the horse a few years in advance, and there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. But the big thing is that it's depth, right? World Cup year. And I can't wait to see Angus in a Waratahs jersey this time next year.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant move. And it was a false start, wasn't there, a few years ago, where there was some noises about it. I think Hamish McLennan was very keen on Angus Crichton coming across as well, as was Eddie Jones. It didn't get there.
Well, I actually asked Eddie at the tail end of one of those famous press conferences there when they were still down near Saint Etienne, and he shut me down straight away. And I said to him, well, Eddie, I think the Aussie public deserves an explanation here, and we just moved on. So.
Well, that was the case with Eddie Jones. He didn't want to discuss anything beyond that World Cup campaign. So I can slightly see it from...
He was already planning to be elsewhere, though.
Well, yeah. As he once said, selections is about contradiction. There's contradictions in selections, and he's 12 months or 10 months with the Wallabies was full of contradictions, wasn't it? And probably continues to be. But enough on that subject. It's a great move. I think it had been whispered, and it was in the back room in the pipeline for really a good month.
Yep.
This move, and it was the 2 weeks leading up to it, the fortnight leading up to it, where there was some steam, and it looks like it was going to get pulled off. The fact that Zach Lomax, that door, all that kind of shut there, meant that Rugby Australia was only going to be putting money towards a top-up with one of those players. And it was interesting that Les Kiss, from my understanding, thought coming out of the spring tour that there was an absence of depth in the midfield and the absence of a strong, potent runner in that 12 jersey.
Which we've kind of been talking about for some time now.
Yeah, and it's exactly why I thought Samu Karevi should have been part of the Wallabies for the last 12 months and wasn't for whatever reason. But so I think Les Kiss drove and helped drive this, was a strong advocate for it. Now, clearly he's a former rugby league player himself, so maybe he's always appreciated it. But it's a good move because it gives them options. I'd still have Karevi in the mix. Crichton's going to bring over professionalism standards, a seriously hard edge. He's a strong ball runner. He's got experience in the game, even though it's been a long time. And he's kind of kept in touch with players right throughout. I was at the Shoot Shield final a couple of years ago when East won. He was there on the hill. He's good mates with Jack Maddox, who's
Sione Tuipulotu too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's funny how professional rugby players actually, some of them watch a lot of rugby and a lot don't. But Angus Scott Young falls in the category of watching a bit. And so I think that's a good thing because I think it'll help the transition back. You've got to remember, this is a quick 12 months he's got, doesn't he, to really get up to speed. You could argue if it's going to be either Tom Lyon or if it's going to be Carter Gordon, that's going to be the 10 for the Wallabies, the 27 World Cup. Well, get him to Queensland so he can play alongside him at 10-12. But there's going to be a lot of these Waratahs players are going to be forming the Wallabies back line. Having Crichton there for the Waratahs, 12 months, he'll be there. The question, does he go on the end of season spring tour this year? I think he probably does, but it's a good deal. They haven't broken the bank for him. And I think there'll be a lot of people excited about going to Waratahs games next year if you've got guys like Swaley, Jorgensen, and Crichton there now.
One to look forward to. Yeah, intriguing to see whether he will play that Rugby League World Cup or head off on the spring tour.
So it's a Swaley. I agree what you said there. If it was a Crichton into an Ikitau, I think Ikitau, even though he did a great job at 12, I think he maybe he suits that for a Joe Schmidt coached environment where it's high possession. We don't quite know what kind of possession game Les Kiss is going to play, particularly from an international level. Like Joe Schmidt, what he's doing at the moment is going against the trend of international rugby where it's kick heavy, contestables. Joe Schmidt's possession heavy, and that suits that Ikitau who's so close,
gets in and take pick and goes all the time.
Exactly. Crichton's not going to be playing that type of game, is he? So, and I think Les Kiss probably does see Swaley more effective in the back three. So I absolutely think that'll be on going forward. And isn't there going to be some seriously powerful, potent athletes in the Wallabies back three there? When you think of Nwangini-Duasi, who's going to be up in Japan, you're going to have Pataya, who's spent a long time with Les Kiss and likely going to be in the frame for Wallaby selection. Of course, Swaley. You throw in the skill of Tom Wright and the nous, the IQ of Tom Wright, with a developing very good athlete in Max Jorgensen, and then you got the Dylan Peaches of the world too. There are some seriously strong, powerful athletes. As always, though, rugby is generally one in the top five, isn't it? So that'll be the fascinating one for the Wallabies going forward.
It certainly is. There's another name up north. I'm not going to drop it to you today. I might let you think about who I'm thinking about for the next few weeks and bring it up, and we'll just see whether we're aligned on that one. Okay. But let's go to the big super preview for 2026 and start down in Canberra with the ACT Brumbies, where one of the men we're just talking about, Len Ikitau, unfortunately injured at Exeter right now. He clearly won't be in Canberra this year. Neither will Noah Lolosio or Tom Hooper. And Christy, if you're going to pick three guys out of that Brumbies, so maybe Tom Wright in there as well, like that you wouldn't want to lose all at once, that'd be pretty close to the trio.
I think it's going to be a long year for the Brumbies.
That's the kind of chat they'll absolutely be eating up right now.
Absolutely. And it's been I don't know if it's been the chat for the last 2 years, but there's been people that have thought, are they going to slip back? Is this the year? I think it is the year this year. There's too many players, too many high-quality players. Even though their program is fantastic, they develop players better than most. You throw in those 5, 6 guys that are going to be missing for a huge chunk. I can't see how the Brumbies make the finals. Tom Wright, I think, comes back midway through the season. Alan Alatoa probably will, even though there's some question marks.
Yeah, that news just on Friday last week.
Yeah, that, again, had been known within the Brumby circles for weeks. So it didn't come as a surprise to the Brumbies, certainly to the public it had. A lot of people trying to keep the actual severity of his injury down. It might be back related, stress fractures related. Either way, Alan Alatoa is key to the Wallabies going forward for the next 20 months. And so they want to ensure that he's okay going forward. But there's so many big names that are out there. We know Tane Edmonds come down. We know that Jarrah McLeod, who's a very promising young player.
Yeah, we saw him for the First Nations Pacific of 15 down there in Melbourne against the Lions.
Yeah, and he is someone that excites me a lot, that power 12, but he's raw, isn't he? He hasn't made his super debut. He spent time with them when they went up to Japan a couple of months ago. But I just think that there's too many big names missing. Corey Toole, Andy Muirhead, the Ollie Sapsfords of the world, the Rory Scotts. They've still got a couple of handy locks in there in Neville and Nick Frost, but I think that it could be tough for them.
I have got some talented young forwards coming through. Toby McPherson, bit of a star at, I think, Aussie under-20s level. And Linton Yelly, is it? Good raps on him up in the front row. And then, even in the back line, that game, Declan Meredith. I don't know that Tane Edmed's going to come in and be a short in, week in, week out down there. I like the little bits and pieces we saw of Declan Meredith last year.
Yeah, and I'll go as far to say I think he's the best touch finder from any Australian kicker, but certainly 10. And he's lining up at 15, I think, in a trial coming up with Edmund at 10. But
obviously no Tom Wright for, you would think, the majority of the season.
I think it's half the season. Yeah, he's made pretty good progress, is my understanding, but it's still going to be half the season, I think, that he's missing. So that's a long way back if you're trying to catch up, and we know how important it is to finish top 2 in Super Rugby. So, yeah, Meredith is a competent player. He's not as young as people think either. He's now in his mid to late 20s as opposed to what I think people think he's in his early 20s, but a good young player. Austin Anderson's guys that have been there for a while are now going to get an opportunity. They've got to take it. And for Stephen Larkham's hope, they've just got to win. They've got to be rock solid at home and just squeeze a couple of games away to get back into the finals mix, and then you never know.
We shall see. The Blues, clearly the big news, as we mentioned, Vern Cotter. This will be his final year in Auckland. No Rico Ioane this year, who's over at Leinster. We know Hoskins Tutu, this will be his final year before he heads up to Newcastle Red Bulls up there in the Premiership. So I don't want to call it a bit of a last dance moment for the Blues. They've still got an incredibly solid squad and will be really, really tough to beat at home. But I don't know if they look as powerful this year, potentially, as they have in seasons past.
Peter Arkai comes after a stint at Toulouse, really good player. And I think, if anything, like Rico Ioane struggled for most of Super Rugby last year. I think he'll be better for it. Beauden Barrett's the big one, isn't it? They didn't have Perifetta for a long while last year too. So Ofatunga Farsi, the Patrick Tuipulotu, who missed last year's Grand Slam tour for the All Blacks, I think that they'll be up there. I don't know of top 2, but I think they'll make the finals. You're right. It does have that last dance feel about it. How does Beauden Barrett continue to go? Like, he's not the Beauden Barrett of 5 to 10 years ago, is he? But he's still, we saw glimpses of him last year where he can do things that not many others can. And the fact that Super Rugby's looser, defenses aren't as strong, that suits a Beauden Barrett to the T.
Interesting times in Auckland.
Do you think they make finals?
I think they make finals. I haven't got them certainly in the top 2. I think they'll probably be in that scramble for positions, 3 through 6 again.
Ricky Riccatelli's left as well, I'm pretty sure.
He's gone.
He has been an outstanding New Zealand servant. The fact that he didn't make the All Blacks just shows how strong they are and have been for some time. He was some player.
Dalton Papali'i, a bit of a point to prove.
Yeah, and he was definitely, we kind of touched upon it last week, I think, but he was definitely one of the people that agitated, that was not happy by, what occurred under the Scott Robertson regime. So you're right, a point to prove. They all do. They've got a lot of good players. That back row. They were slow out of the gates last year, the Blues, and maybe that's why people are just going, not sure if they will be as strong in 2026 as they were in 2024. I still have them making definitely top 6, probably that 4th, 5th position, maybe.
Chiefs, new coach, Jono Gibbs, great of the early years of the Chiefs there, certainly the early noughties from memory, replaces Clayton McMillan, who's gone up to Munster, if memory serves. So a change over there. They've got some fresh blood in Corin Tamoifalau, the Moana Flyer, who scored some absolutely sensational tries last year. Tyrone Thompson comes back from the Newcastle Knights and the NRL, where I didn't watch a lot of Knights games personally, so couldn't tell you how he went or if he played at all. And Anton Leonard-Brown on sabbatical. A big one has been, injuries aside, which he's had a few of, particularly in the sort of shoulder area. That's a big loss. He's been such a fixture of that team now for probably the best part of a decade. But do get Lalakai Foketi from the Waratahs.
Yeah, and hasn't Lalakai Foketi made more headlines over the last 6 months than perhaps he did during his whole career in Australian rugby, perhaps for the wrong reasons, but I do hope that Lalakai goes well. He's an experienced campaigner that comes back in. You mentioned Kyron. He's going to be brilliant for them. You think another year for Leo Okada. They've Sean Stevenson's finished up. I'm pretty sure to gone to Japan. They're going to be a very good team, aren't they? And the fact that Damien McKenzie, they've got a strong, competent backup 10 there, so they can go from 10 to 15 very, very easily. I think they'll be good. John O'Gibbs has been around for a while. He was linked actually to joining the Wallabies at one point in time about 18 months ago. Good coach, well credentialed. He's been waiting in the wings for a little while for a role. I think they'll go there well. Look at their forward pack; it's still outstanding, isn't it? Like the second row, back row is just brilliant, and
loads of depth there.
Yeah, and that's the big thing.
Wallace Satiti also missed a chunk. I think it was about the first 7 or 8 weeks last year from memory. His All Blacks, I don't think he really ever quite got going as well as he did the year prior after that. So I'm looking for a big season from him. And as you say, there is plenty of depth up front. So I think the question is, with the Chiefs, can they really deliver in those key moments? We saw them beaten at home against by the Blues in that opening week of the quarters last year, wasn't it? And that kind of upset they lost top seeding as a result. And the finals became infinitely tougher from there. But yeah, I think they're a top 2 team.
Yeah, I would say top 3. And yeah, he's an impressionable figure, is Clayton McMillan. I kind of see him in a couple of years very much being, whatever happens, who's the next coach, if they don't go very well at the next World Cup, I can see McMillan being the one after.
Crusaders almost feel, just that little bit more fascinating this year, given what's happening in the past, couple of weeks now, and how adored Scott Robertson is in that part of the world. Clearly, the All Blacks and Super Rugby are 2 separate beasts, but the success that they had there under him, the amount of players that are still there at the Crusaders from the Razor years, you just wonder how they're all feeling about the situation. But beside the point, Rob Penny was almost given the arse at the end of 2024. They give him a reprieve. He comes out and wins the championship for them in 2025. And look, it'll be a brave man to bet against them going back to back. No James O'Connor, of course, has moved on up to Leicester. But they've got the young 5'8" Tahs Camara back alongside Rivez Raihana, who was kind of starting there, and O'Connor coming off the bench towards the end of last year. But they're still loaded with All Blacks. We know that they've got this ability to bring through players through their academy year after year. And look, they're going to be, as I said, off the top, bloody hard to beat again.
Yeah, brought back Lester Fainga'anuku as well.
The big one, yeah.
We saw him come back for the All Blacks last year. That guy is just a tackle-busting machine. He left as a 13, winger 13. He's now more of a 13, 12 than he is probably a winger. But, oh gosh, like fantasy is a big thing these days. If you're thinking about who the bloke is that you might put in at 13, Lester Fainga'anuku is one that I'm chucking in there. He's just so good. I think the O'Connor, him leaving, I think his role in the finals is obviously downplayed last year because he barely played a minute, but he got those young 10s to a position where they could own the show, and it's now about them kicking on. So if they can, O'Connor's done his job once again. That'll be quality. I think they'll probably be top 5, maybe top 4. We're going to throw a lot of these New Zealand sides in there, aren't they? But it's hard to see them not going well. I think there's one more Kiwi team that I think might go even better than all of them, which we'll come to.
Will Jordan, of course, just scores tries for fun, not only at test level, but Super Rugby. I'll come out this week. I reckon he'll score get a double in the first game out this year, providing he's fit and healthy, because that's what he does. Highlanders, look, there's clearly another narrative going around down in Dunedin right now with Jamie Joseph, one of the leading candidates for that All Blacks job, pending. It doesn't look like Tony Brown's going to be available for his coaching team. Still kind of feels like he's right there neck and neck with Dave Rennie. Look, Highlanders, year in, year out, the last few, they've struggled to attract the bigger names. We know they're kind of the poor cousin of the New Zealand franchises, I guess, is a good way to put it. But they had a crack. They weren't disgraced in any games really at all last year. I think played above the depth of their squad. And I feel like they'll probably offer similar nuisance again this year.
I think they'll kick on.
Okay.
I see them, of all the sides, maybe being the one that kicks on the most. They unfortunately really copped a whack losing Dylan Pledger, their young rising halfback, who had a breakout season for Otago last year, really quick. It had Justin Marshall saying he should be on the All Blacks end of year tour. He criticised Scott Robinson for not taking the gamble there and taking on and kicking on, developing a guy who's clearly going to be a player of the future, but they've lost him. That's a big blow, but they've still got Folau Fakatoa, who's an All Black in himself. So I look at that squad and I go, they've actually strengthened their front row. Angus Taubau's come down. The fact that Fabian Holland, breakout player of the year for last year, quality player. Their back row's always been quite hard. I think they're getting better. And then just their back line as well. Like they've got a lot of pace. They had copped a lot of injuries last year, but I think that the depth has developed and they've brought through a couple of guys there as well. Rajan Pasatoa, from an Australian perspective, will be interesting to watch. He had a pretty good campaign for Northland. I reckon he will benefit from playing under Jamie Joseph. I can see them knocking on the door for finals. They might be in a race, the 6th spot, and I reckon they might just get there.
Okay, big call. And obviously last year, Tamuki Tavatava Nawai had such a season that he got that All Blacks call up against France, kind of drifted there away through the Rugby Championship thereafter. I don't think, did we see him on the spring tour from memory from the All Blacks?
No, he picked up that injury. Might have even been against France or Argentina, but yeah, he missed most of the season.
He was formidable for the Highlanders though last year, wasn't he, on an attack and then over the ball, like multiple steals a game and a real threat there in the centres. So yeah, I think, as you mentioned there, the big question mark with the Highlanders, can they survive injuries? They haven't got the depth of roster that the other franchises do. And I feel sort of late in the season, I think they sort of won maybe 3 of their first 5 last year and were right in the mix. But when the tough gets going later in the season, I'm not sure they've got that real true depth in squad list to stack up and fight their way to the finals.
They've struggled against New Zealand opponents, haven't they? And they've got to play more than the Aussies do because they're in
that's the draw.
Official conference, aren't they? But they'll benefit from having Otago reach the final last year in the NPC. So from a cohesion perspective, they've spent more time together than anyone else. Like Southland had a hard edge to themselves, particularly in the first half of that NPC season. So yeah, I can see them just causing the Aussie sides particularly a fair bit of grief. And I reckon they can sneak a win or two against their fellow Kiwi opponents.
Few upsets. That's kind of what we want Super Rugby to throw up a bit more this year. We saw the start of it last year here and there, but that greater unpredictability week to week, that's what we're looking for. That's the sign of a true, intense, hard week-to-week competition. And we mentioned that with Jack Messley when he came on earlier in the pod last year. It kind of filled it away a little bit towards the finish, but that's the kind of team that the Highlanders and, say, the Fijian Drua, which we're about to come to, need to start to compete to be.
Yeah, totally. And they've brought in Lavanini, haven't they?
Yeah.
The Argentine lock.
Puma's lock, yep.
Yeah, so I think that they've got a tight 5 that's now pretty handy.
Under or over 4 yellow cards for Lavanini through the season?
I'll go under, but it's a good question.
Keep an eye out for that one. Fijian Drua, as we mentioned, Glenn Jackson's still there. Look, we're probably frustrating, I think, at times last year. Christy played some wonderful rugby. Probably should have beaten the Waratahs here next door in the Schmidt House at Allianz Stadium there early in the season. Mixed some really good with some pretty ordinary stuff. Obviously, almost beat the Hurricanes in Napier, was it, earlier in the year too? So, look, they bring in familiar name for Australia, Isaac Fines-Lolawasa, with his Fijian heritage. That'll be interesting to see. They've always had great halfbacks, though, haven't they? Really energetic guys. And, similar suspects are back again through their pack and out wide. Longan Amasi, I think, was the real star out wide for them last year. Another year for Isaiah Armstrong-Ravula. So, look, I can't see them making the finals, but again, I think they'll tip over a few sides, certainly at home.
Certainly at home. They lost to Vita Icanoveri, didn't they? And I've made a hell of his name.
Yeah.
He's been the heart and soul
Yep.
for the Drua for a long while. Hooker, really well regarded. He's a huge loss. They're still going to have a front row that's pretty strong. They're always going to have athletes. The thing that I feel about some coaches is some coaches are head coaches, some are assistants, and Glenn Jackson learned a lot about himself last year from a coaching aspect, but he tried to please too many people in the first month by giving people options. There was routinely changes, and my understanding is that if he had his time again, he wouldn't have done that.
Okay.
But some coaches are head coaches, as I say. I don't know if Glenn Jackson's a head coach just at the moment. This is a year to prove that. Very, very well regarded assistant. We'll see what the Drua have, but I feel like it's almost a rebuilding year, and it can't be that for them because they haven't won on the road for a long, long time. So they have to be rock solid at home, and then they've got to break that run away. I don't know if they will. I can't see them making the finals.
No, I think they miss probably in around that 9, 10, 11 position. Hurricanes. Now, I think you're going to tell me that they're your tip for this year.
They are.
It's looking that way. Have got an All Black laden squad. I think probably, the best back row just about in the competition, certainly in terms of its work rate and athleticism. They've got probably the number 2 halfback in the world in Cam Roigard, who just gets better year on year and missed a chunk of last year. And the guy for me, Ruben Love, who I thought looked really, really good at first 5 last year. Expect we might see him at the back to start with in the fullback role to which he is more accustomed. But I look at this squad now and I think, you know what, this is genuinely a team that can compete for the title.
Yeah, it's the title-winning squad for mine. I'm calling it right now.
Okay.
They've got Werner Deans, the Japanese captain that's come down. That's a great signing. It's going to be good for the competition. I'm really excited about what he'll do. He's just so athletic. His work rate's unbelievable. He might find the physicality definitely a step up, but he's copped that for 10 weeks for playing for Japan over the last couple of years. He is something special, and I think, New Zealand born, lived there for first, up until he was 15 or so before going up to Japan. Through his parents, I think his dad got a strength and conditioning role up in Japan, and then all of a sudden found himself there.
Billy Proctor now in All Black. Geordie Barrett comes back.
That's the other big one. Geordie Barrett comes back. So I think that they've got the experienced hard edge now back with Geordie Barrett there, who's the perfect foil for some of those young guys like the Harkins of the world. Of course, the Ruben Love. I'm really excited about what they can do. Second year for Clark Laidlaw, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
It's
coach, yep.
Yeah, and then I think last year you saw Safa Amua kind of go in and out. He had injuries. He missed the entire international season. He's a player who is so destructive. If Xavier Nyamea can fix up his scrummaging technique a little bit, then all of a sudden they are going to be scary.
Yeah, Josh Morby returns as well, another quality outside back, and I just love the blend of their back row.
Out wide, yeah.
Kenny was brilliant last year, but yeah, the Karifi, Yosei, and Peter Lakai with the experience of Shields and Flanders now, they're served really well served for depth there. I don't know if they're my title-winning team. I'll put them in the top 2.
Well,
there you go. Okay, we've done the Drua. Let's go to Moana. Now, clearly, there's one name here, incredibly topical at the moment, as he is week to week in World Rugby, really not just New Zealand rugby. There will, of course, be no Artie Sevilla at Moana this season. He's back in Japan at Kobe, as we mentioned last week. A huge loss, almost single-handedly dragged that franchise into a maiden finals berth. Was brilliant in wins over the Crusaders and Waratahs and a couple of others along the way. It's a massive loss. Nani Laumapi returns. We saw him in the AusNZ game against the Lions last year.
Underwhelming.
He
return.
Was, but that was an underwhelming game, pretty much full stop, wasn't it? So we won't be harsh to judge him on that performance alone when so many of his colleagues that day were pretty ordinary at the same time. Look, it feels like a tall order for them to ride the momentum of last year, having lost Sevilla.
Yeah, they're great. And I just can't see them making the finals. They were so close. Did they end up beating the Highlanders last year under the roof? If they didn't, it was
very
a
close,
seesawing game. It was one of the games of the season. I hope some of the lessons of that fight, that never say die attitude that Artie has, that his teammates follow suit. Miracle Failangi is going to be the skipper. They're going to have some athletes once again. It's just the discipline, taking their chances. They've got a pretty cool midfield, don't they? With some strong ball running options. But, when you lose a couple of players, Kyron included, it just makes it even harder to build on that consistency. And the future of Moana Pacific is still not completely rock solid either. They've got to attract investors all the time. So they've got more to play for than just that. Do they potentially look to go back to the islands a little bit more? Do they potentially get moved, relocated a game or two in Western Sydney? There's a few kind of talks and rumblings about that and have there for a while. So, yeah, but hopefully they're an entertaining game and team to watch. Hopefully we see some bright things about them in 2026.
Yeah, Miracle Failangi, as you mentioned, they're great story. First on-island representative to name to Moana Pacifica, and has got better year on year, and was, a couple of times last year, if he wasn't, outplaying Sevilla, he was right there with him. That's how good he was going.
It was like the Bash Brothers, 1-2. Yeah.
So a name to watch on there. Waratahs, as we spoke about earlier, hell of an off-season, and they managed to escape to Mudgee last weekend for a nice warm few days on the training paddock out there at Glen Willow.
You would have been out there complex. For a wine or two.
Well, back over Christmas I was. Thankfully, it wasn't that hot then, mate. I can actually recommend the Huntington Estate out there. Got there for a very good Cab Sav Shiraz blend, but we'll come back to that on our winemakers episode later in the year. Look, we know there's been a heap of recruits for the Waratahs. Angus Scott Young is clearly one of them. Ioane Moanano, who came across from the Crusaders, is a big one. Then you also got Matt Phillip, Pete Samu, Harry Potter, and a couple of others. Angus Scott Young, who I mentioned as well. Look,
George Pullman.
Feels like this is more of a Dan McKellar squad now. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. And it's not surprising that the people that he's really gone after so far are those harder type five.
Falau Fainga, another one there.
Yeah, of course, big one off the back of Dave Parecki retiring pretty abruptly. It does have more of a McKellar edge around it. The news today, Matt Phillip being named captain, not surprised there. If you think about people that you're looking and turning to, there's a lot of youth, there's a lot of inexperience, there's a lot of new faces to the Waratahs, but here's a guy in Matt Phillip who's travelled, been at the Force, been at the Rebels, been up to Japan, back to the Rebels, back to Japan, and now he's back at the Waratahs, who's the state and the franchise that he dreamed of playing for. I think it's great that he's there. He's a very good type 5 player. I think they'll surprise a few people. I think there's a few people going, are they going to make the finals? They were really underwhelming last year. They were. I think they'll be better than they were last year. What was it, 7th or 8th they finished last year?
8th, I think.
Yeah, it was like that last game they needed to beat the Blues. They didn't. I can see them once again that 6th, 7th, but I think they'll be better than last year. It comes down maybe to their front row. They've clearly got no Bell, no Tupou. Not that Tupou was great for the Waratahs last year, but I don't think the scrum's as important as what it was 5-10 years ago in Super Rugby, because it's now all about pace, speed. They've got the free kick law in there now that they've adapted. So sides aren't going to get blown off the park as much as they will in the front row at the scrum as they would have a couple of years ago. And the other thing that they've got, the Waratahs, is they won the Super Rugby Odds Comp last year. I know it was only 3 games and then a final where they upset then the Force, who were really poor on that afternoon. But they got a fair bit of belief out of that under Lockie McCaffrey. There was a fair bit of internal feedback that was given to Dan McKellar. My understanding is that he took it really well.
Okay.
I'm not saying loosened up his approach, but he's brought a bit more of a fun element on Fridays, which is what they were looking for. And I think that he's always been one that's sought feedback, Dan McKellar, and I think he'll go well. I think you'll probably see a little bit more Teddy Wilson this year as well. Regardless of the fact that Jake Gordon has been the number 9 under Joe Schmidt.
Well, in the news just this morning that Jake Gordon is no longer the captain. I think that's probably a good move. Not that I've got anything against Jake Gordon's captaincy. He's been a great performer for the Waratahs for a number of years now, but you come to a time, you often see it with players of his age that just want to step away for a bit and concentrate on their own game. And Matt Phillip now gets the job from Locke. I probably share your concerns around the scrum, having lost those guys. Bell has been, a workhorse for them and so damaging with ball in hand as well. So he's a massive loss. Jack Debrasini intrigues me because I think I've said it on here before, Christy. I feel like if there's a player that if we could have rewritten how his rugby journey has gone here in Australia, he'd be at the top of my list. Going to the Rebels so early as he did in his career, I don't think that was the place for him. To me, he's always had the raw tools to be a very, very good playmaker and maybe a test playmaker. I feel like that time has probably, almost passed him by, unfortunately, but I'm really keen to see how he goes at number 10 for the Waratahs this season. Imagine, he will get a crack. You mentioned last week, I think he was leading the race to start in the trial game this week.
I don't think about the trial game. I think it'll be lost to Crichton, but I think he's leading the race to be the 10.
My apologies. So that is the one that really stands out for me that I'm keen to watch him go.
Yeah, a good shout. If Jack Debrasini can do what you want from a 10 and he can stay fit, the Waratahs have a great chance. He's got the biggest kick by a country mile. Meredith might be very accurate and have length from his for kicking for touch, but Debrasini he kicks the lever.
It's easy power too,
and it is easy power. It's effortless. He's got a great pass on him. He's experienced. He's played under McKellar in the past, so I think he is a great recruit for them. And the Tahs they've obviously got a pretty star-studded backline. What they do with the midfield will be fascinating. I think Swaley's still looking to be at 13, even though I don't think McKellar thinks he's a 13. I think McKellar thinks he's an outside back, but with the options that they've got to play at the moment, I think you'll probably find him at 13. Sid Harvey is an interesting one. I don't know how much game time he'll get, particularly early on, but he's got really big raps from the Waratahs coaches. They see him as player of the future, Sevens pathway, junior Wallaby last year, can kick goals, a talented player, but I think he's not Max Jorgensen, comes on the scene at 18, blows everyone's mind, but I think he'd be a very good player going forward.
Yeah, Narrabri Blue Ball, I believe, out there in the glorious Central North.
Big year for, Luke Reimer's heading to the Tahs next year, probably the best jackler in the competition. But big year for Charlie Gamble as well, just to see what he does next, but also he's a guy that, if we scroll back to the Lions match last year, there was two players that stood out for me. One was Amatero. I forget he actually had a pretty good game, I think, from memory, but it was Campbell as well, who was outstanding. And he was outstanding maybe for that Pacifica side as well, perhaps. But there's something about Gamble that when he's on, he's a very, very good player that's hard to move. He's limited in some of the other aspects, which is why he hasn't kicked on play for the Wallabies. But Rennie loved him.
Yeah, he's very close then. Yeah,
and he was
very
camp, close. Yeah, and then he just fell back for a year or two. But he wasn't playing at 7 in that Hoops year in 2023. I think this could be another good year for him.
Another one to look out for there at New South Wales, who open up at home next door here to the Reds in a few weeks' time outside of the trial game that they've got at Ballymore this weekend. And it's to Ballymore, where we'll go now for the Reds. Les Kiss's final year in charge of his 3-year deal, clearly moving on to the Wallabies in the middle of the year. And Christy, look, I think there's a lot of people out there for whom the Reds are going to be right at the top of their list of expectation. Now or never, this squad has been building, and they've got depth in key positions, particularly at number 10 now, where they have struggled in terms of injuries.
Well, more on that in a second, actually.
Tom Line, okay, there you go. Stay tuned, rather. They will miss Harry Wilson, of course, for the first 6 weeks. You feel like Joe Bryle, who was really, really strong for them for much of last year. Big opportunity for him to step up again the start of the season. But the pressure is on. There is the expectation that the Reds will be the best team in Australia and should be pushing for a home semi-final. Can they do it?
They have to be. They'll be carrying the flag for a lot of people. Can they do it? They should. Will they? I think they'll make the semis, but the pressure is so firmly on Les Kiss to have this side deliver. It's not funny. And it's not just Reds fans. Australian rugby fans should want the Reds to go well. They should get around it. I hope the Reds can draw big crowds. It's a big, big moment for the Queensland Reds. 3 years they have been building. They were building under Brad Thorne. They plateaued. Then they took a step forward under Les Kiss. Now they need to take a giant leap and really host a semi-final.
Yep.
Not just,
Well, I haven't hosted a quarterfinal yet.
Exactly, and that's been the undoing for them and other sides that make the quarters as well. They've got a pretty good roster. I think the loss of Orion Smith might be felt more and more as the season goes.
Yep.
I still think that was a mistake from Queensland Rugby. I know that he was offered more money to go up to Ospreys, but he's the sort of figure that you need to keep in Aussie rugby. There's too many of them. Darcy Swain's, leaving the force. It's those sorts of guys when they get into their late 20s or early 30s, you've got to be able to keep a couple of them. That could hurt. That's where I just start to go, even the Reds, they've lost Sapphire Garci, a guy that helped them out at times last year with his experience. But you look through that team and you're right, it is star-studded. The backline's got a lot of X factor around it. If guys had like Dre Pacquiao's come through,
yep.
Second year, is he just as effective? There's a lot of second year syndrome that does occur. Hopefully it's not for him. But I like their back row. They'll be helped out when Harry Wilson returns. They've got an embarrassment riches at hooker they have for a while. Interesting about the 10s. My understanding is Tom Lyon is still not 100% fit.
Well, that's a concern, Christy, because that's a long time now, and we're getting into, if we look at history and say the NRL with, say, a Jake Friend or a Boyd Cordner, that I don't want to say it's at that extent yet. He hasn't had that sheer number of head knocks, but if that's the hamstring you're referring to.
Yeah, I think it's the hamstring more.
Okay.
Definitely the head stuff was a huge issue last year. I don't think it is to this year, but just not training at 100%, I don't think, at the moment. He's off contract at the end of the year as well, so it's going to be a really fascinating one to see what happens with Tom Liner, his future, both with the Wallabies and with the Reds. To see what goes on there, certainly with his name and his old man, his younger brother, Nico, is signed there, be part of the development roster at the moment. Do we ever see the three-liner boys play together, both either here at the Reds or at Benetton? That'll be a fascinating one. But, I think Benny Volavola missed a little bit of time. He might be coming back as well. So the depth that you think is on the surface there at the 10s, I know that Tommy Liner was up for media a week or two ago as well. I don't think it's as healthy as what you might think on the surface. Clearly, Tate McDermott's going to miss probably about the first month.
Okay.
Louis Wertron back, really talented player. Kalani Thomas, who made his Wallabies debut. So it's strong, but it's not as strong as maybe as you'd hope if you're thinking, are they going to be a Super Rugby contender? What they do have is Paisamis, the Dangunus, who I think is just missing a week or two at the moment as well. But there's enough quality over there to be a genuine chance to host a semi. A big one, we need Massimo DeLutis and those sorts of guys to have a strong, healthy year. He played the first half last year, impressive, even though he didn't blow people's minds, but he's the guy that should continue to develop nicely. Micron had huge raps on him. It's a big year.
They get Aidan Ross, who made his Wallabies debut mid-year and played for the Reds against the Lions too. Yeah. So he's already capped as a Queenslander. So good luck to Aidan and the rest of the Reds this year. A lot of Australians will be watching, not just those in Queensland, I'm sure.
Yeah, young Pritchard as well. Do we see him...
Geez, he was the eye catcher in that Aussie under 18s games, wasn't he? And one of those players that immediately just thought, I bet he signed to an NRL club. So the joy that a lot of people had in finding out that he was actually already on the books at the QRU, wants to play rugby, sees his future there, that was a real kind of refreshing discovery.
Well, and they've done a great job over the last couple of years of signing out talent. I know that there was the big one that they lost with Kite last year, but they've got they're looking at how they can repatriate a couple of players as well. And they have definitely got their house in order. Like you use that to open up about their house in order. They absolutely do. From Sam Cordingley as their GM to do what they've done for this story not to have leaked about Vern Cotter and itself. They are doing what Rugby Australia should be doing themselves. So, hat tip to them.
Big season ahead for the Reds. Wrapping us up is the Western Force. And I said to you before we came on today, Chrissy, that it just feels like a classic Western Force squad again. And it's probably, you mentioned, you use the words thrown together, and that's probably about the best way you kind of can describe it. You look at it and you think, yeah, there's some talented players there, but how they come together and how they can win enough games to get themselves into finals contention, I just don't see it again.
It's almost got a barbarians feel to it,
Mm.
and they have for a long time. Like, if you design and you went back 20 odd years to go, how do we ensure that the Western Force is strong? Well, clearly the Perth competition's not as strong as what it needs to be. They need to defeat a club or two, one being in Sydney, one being
Yep.
in Brisbane, or just one full stop. And then just all those players that come through the system can be totally attached to the Force at the hip. It hasn't ever been the way. And, you know, Simon Cron is, he knows Sydney rugby very well. He obviously coached with Northern Suburbs. He's done his best there. I like what they've done with their front row. They've actually strengthened it. Some of their signings have been astute ones, I think, when you bring over Hokoeda and when you bring over Fargasi, they've done well there. Their second row is stronger this year with the Argentine coming over.
Molina, yep.
When you got Jeremy Williams another year on Darcy Swain, you know, even bringing him back, Nathan Hasty looks like a really young, like good prospect.
West Aussie too.
Wants to play for the Wallabies. Good story. Grew up there. That's a great story in a similar way to the Carlo Tizzano. So hopefully he kicks on and has a really successful one. But you know, the rest of it just feels like, you know, it's a bit patchy. You know, George Bridge, really good player. Where's he at in terms of career-wise? Hopefully he has a great year, and we're left with a bit of egg out on our face. But you know, the Peaches, they've still got some names there. The Bills, they've still got the Stewarts, the Baylor Quins. So there's enough talent there. But Ben Darwin must be going, Cross, this is not how you draw up a team, because they've all come from effectively everywhere, and you're asking them to play and to push on. So they need to be healthy, clearly, at the back end. Another year for Nick Champion to Crepney off the back of an international campaign. So how they get up physically will be fascinating, but he should be okay off the back of his years up in the top 14. But they need to be, they need to ensure that their depth remains, that they're not hit hard by injuries. But it's just whether or not the continuity can work. And like I said it before, losing Darcy Swain kills me if I'm a Force player, because yes, he's come over a year or so ago, had a great year. He's probably going to have another good year now. I think Rugby Australia, if I'm reflecting on why is Darcy Swain leaving, well, firstly, Rob Simmons, I think, is finishing up at Clermont, a player to come in to hopefully fit in seamlessly their line-out call of the rest of it. But Darcy Swain was treated horribly on last year's end of the season spring tour. You know, he gets brought in, parachuted in from that Aussie A side, right? And then without even Will Skelton having his medical, Swain's sent back. And you could have had a Swain in there, you know, who's the line-out coach there at the time, Tom Donnelly. I just don't think the communication and the messaging was good enough. And if you're thinking, well, am I going to go overseas? I probably am, because I've been treated maybe poorly, and a lot of the players weren't happy with how he was treated up there. That was a moment and a missed opportunity. So it frustrates me that a Swain, who should be at the Force for a while, coming into some of his best, is now there for one more season before going to Clermont.
Heading to the departure lounge. A big year for Ben Donaldson. I know you spoke to him late last year for the Raw. Great interview. I think a lot of people were left asking, well, what's Ben Donaldson done here? Helped get the Wallabies over the line in Sydney with his boot and that thunderstorm, I guess you'd have to call it, downpour out at Stadium Australia in the third lines test, and then we barely saw him again, if we saw him again, in the Wallaby jersey thereafter. So, look, I think he's got a point to prove. It'll be his second or third season over there.
Oh, third.
Third now. And maybe, you know, a partnership with Nathan Hasty there, 9 and 10. Darby Lancaster there as well, coming across from the Waratahs, doing a switch virtually with Harry Potter. So, look, you feel like they've got to win just about everyone, or, you know, all but one of their home games, and somehow find a way to pinch one or two on the road where they have struggled year in, year out in Super Rugby. But again, I kind of feel like, sadly, it's a no finals year for the Force.
I think they'll challenge at stages throughout the season. It's about ensuring that they don't, they don't miss those opportunities because they were right. Think about last year, like even the Hurricanes, there was opportunities there to win the game and they drew the game. They should have won it. And this is a year, I think, for all of the Aussie sides to, in the same way, I think the reason why Jake Gordon had to step aside there is, even though I like Jake Gordon, I think he's a very talented player. I think he's got leadership capabilities, very well spoken. He hasn't won enough. And at the end of the day, eventually you need people who start winning. And that's across the board. The super sides have won at an abysmal rate for the last 12 years, particularly in Australian rugby, since the Waratahs Brumbies made those semi-finals in 2015. So who can start proving that they're a winner? Because that'll help the Wallabies more than anything. And at the moment, New Zealand sides have been able to do it. They perhaps couldn't do it as much last year from a national point of view. And that shows the fact that their high performance is being stretched, the leadership vacuum, perhaps off the back of a couple of generations post 2015, post 23 leaving. Now's an opportunity for the Wallabies, that cohort, to take a step forward because they need to, if the Wallabies are to be a genuine contender come 2027. They need to start winning at Super Rugby level. Until that occurs and they start winning games of Super Rugby matches in finals, the Wallabies won't win.
Okay, your finalists are the Hurricanes and the
Hurricanes, and I will, the heart says Reds, but I think the head says probably Chiefs. But I think the Reds will make top four. I think they really need to. Hopefully they do.
Yeah, I'll put the Crusaders and the Reds in there with the Hurricanes and Chiefs, and I think we may see a Chiefs-Crusaders final. Yet again, that old familiar one. Unfortunately for Australia, like you, I'd love to see the Reds in there. The Waratahs, the Brumbies, surprise the hell out of me, please. I'm sure we would all welcome it. Mate, that's about a wrap for Super Rugby Pacific until we actually hit the ground running in a couple of weeks' time. A little bit of news otherwise for Australia today with the Levi sisters not joining the NRLW. They're committed with the Sevens virtually through now till the 2028 Olympics. Great for the Sevens. And I guess another good headline for Rugby Australia at this time of year.
Yeah, Maya Stewart heading is with the Sevens as well at the moment. Leading record scorer with the Wallaroos. It shows a bit better integration between the two departments. What happens with the women's program is going to be fascinating this year with the Wallaroos particularly. But yeah, it is a good result securing the services of the Levi sisters. They are names. They are quality players. Clearly, Madison is an absolute freak. She'll break every record that there is over the next couple of years. So to have them through to the LA Olympics is massive. We saw last week Lane Morgan finish up. She's going to the Parramatta Eels. That occurred a week and a half earlier, and the news hadn't crept out at that point in time. But does show that a couple more players are still being looked at very closely by the NRLW. So it's really important that they work out the direction, not just of the men, but the women. And that's what I want to hear more from Rugby Australia this year. It's post Lions. How do they secure rugby? What is the direction of rugby?
It can't be a plan just for 2026 and 2027, as we keep hearing Phil Wall talk about that 27. We want to be involved in that final weekend. That's great, but what about 28 to 31?
Yeah, and from a Super Rugby perspective, from TRC, what does it all mean? Because I think there's going to be some massive questions for global rugby, but particularly Super Rugby, ahead of the next broadcast cycle. The new one's obviously just started, but there'll be some massive questions come 2029, and you don't want to be losing all these players going forward. So some big questions around what's the future looking like for Australian rugby. Right now is the time to be looking at that, not in 12 to 18 months.
Indeed. Big year ahead on and off the field. Thanks for listening as ever, team. We'll be back maybe a week off, maybe after round one. We'll just see the way the news is coming this time of year. Christy, who knows? We could have 3 more pods in us yet before kickoff. Great start to the year, and we're in for a big one. You'll hear about it right here at ESPN, and we'll be back soon on ESPN Scrum Reset. Cheers.